The next nikuda is the Shuruk. The sound of the Shuruk is U, like Shuruk Aleph U, Shuruk Beis Bu, Shuruk Gimel Gu. It's the same as the Melupam, but the Shuruk is the servant, is the Eved to the Melupam, which is called the Melech, the king. The graphic design of the Shuruk is 3 dots, and the Alter Rebbe says it's like a cluster of grapes. However, these 3 dots, in contrast, you always hear music a little bit. So what do you want me to do? Start over again? Okay. Take number 96. The next nikuda is the Shuruk. The Shuruk has the sound of U, like Shuruk Aleph U, Shuruk Beis Bu, Shuruk Gimel Gu. The Shuruk is the Eved, is the servant of the Melupam, which is the Melech, the king. The graphic design of the Shuruk is 3 dots, starting from the left, going down to the right. However, it is different than the segel that has 3 dots like a triangle. 1 dot on the right, 1 dot on the left, and 1 dot in the center. Rather, the Shuruk has 3 dots in an angle. And this represents a cluster of grapes. However, an unripe cluster of grapes, in contrast to the segel, that is a ripe cluster of grapes. What is the meaning of Shuruk? The word Shuruk is found in the Torah, in the book of Genesis, in the portion of Vayechi, chapter 49, verse number 11. And over there it says, V'lasoireka. V'lasoireka means, and a single vine. But a vine that has grapes that are yet undeveloped and unripe. And the concept of this vine or this cluster represents a person that continues to go down and down and down. It's a slippery slope. One who distances himself from God, who goes further away from Hashem, until he hits rock bottom. And when he hits rock bottom, he acknowledges that he truly has no power. He acknowledges his insignificance. He acknowledges that without God he is powerless. And now he begins to walk back up the ladder of life, once again to reach the Melupam, to become one with God. And this concept is also expressed in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah also brings down this concept of the Shuruk. In Jeremiah number 2, chapter 2, verse number 21, it says, V'anochi netaticha seirek, and I will, or I have planted you from a choice vine. And it goes on to say, Kula zera emes, Kula zera emes, entirely a faithful seed. In other words, God compares the Jewish people to a seed in which he plants his choice vine. And here too we have the concept, on one hand, the person is going down and down. However, God says, even when you find yourself in your lowest place in the world, in the darkest, coldest place in life, you should know, V'anochi netaticha, I have planted you. The I, the essence of God, is there. I am together with you in your sorrow. I am together with you in your pain. I am together with you in your hardship. And the fact is, you should know you are a zera emes. You are a seed of truth. Emes can mean faithful and also means truth. What is truth? Emes, something which is true in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. That's why the word emes is Aleph Mem Taf. Aleph is the first letter of the Aleph Beis, and Mem is the middle, and Taf is the final letter of the Aleph Beis. Something which is true has to be true in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. And therefore God says, even when you find yourself in your darkest place, even when you find yourself down in Egypt, down in Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim means etymologically limits and constraints, and Mitzrayim was called Ervas Ha'aretz, the most naked and promiscuous of all lands. So even when you find yourself in such a low place, you should know that you are emes, you are a seed of truth, and therefore ultimately you are going to come back. For Anochi, I, says God, the essence of God, I am there with you, and I will schlep you out of this darkness. And this is the concept on Pesach, that we say that God killed the firstborn of Egypt, and He saved the firstborn of the Jewish people. The firstborn is an allusion to one's intellect, Chachma. Chachma is the first of the 10 attributes. And God tells us that He killed the firstborn of Egypt, that up until now our intellect was totally enclosed and embedded within the desires and the temptation of the nakedness of the land. And our intellect was limited, Mitzrayim was limited to the finite reality of the world, of money, of power, of making a living. However, I killed the firstborn of Egypt, and I saved the firstborn of Israel. I took you out of your limitation, and I brought you to a bigger place and a better place, that you realize that your intellect should be used to connect with God and become closer with God, and to put your emphasis and your entire efforts into understanding the greatness of God and the greatness of the Torah. And this is the concept of the Shuruk, that even though you fall to the lowest level, you have the level of Hoid. For the attribute of Shuruk is Hoid. Hoid means acknowledgement. You acknowledge that there's a power greater than yourself. You don't understand it yet. That's the idea of Hoid. I don't really understand it, I can't internalize it, but I acknowledge that there's a higher reality than myself. When a person comes to this realization, that's the first step to recovery. That's the first step to his path home, to his path to come back. And this is also found in the Gematria. What is the Gematria of the Shuruk? The Gematria of the Shuruk is 30. For each dot, we explained, represents 10, similar to the letter Yud. So the Shuruk has 3 dots, alluding to the number 30. What is the number 30? 30 has 2 concepts. On one hand, we find that there are 30 blasts of the chauffeur. Shloishim koilos the chauffeur. On Rosh Hashanah, we are obligated to blow the chauffeur 30 blasts. We also find that kingship is acquired with 30 different levels or 30 different praises. How do we understand these 2 concepts? As we said earlier, Shuruk represents the slippery slope. A person falls down. When he falls down, he acknowledges that he is helpless. He acknowledges that he has no power. He acknowledges that he's insignificant. And that brings him to tshuva, which is the idea of blowing 30 shofar blasts on Rosh Hashanah, is to awaken a person to tshuva. That's the main purpose of the shofar, to awaken the soul of every Jew. And when a person is awakened with the 30 blasts of the shofar, he now begins to walk up the ladder. He begins to walk up the Shuruk, that is the Eved, the servant to the Melupam, and then he becomes one with the king himself, one with God himself, which is the concept of Melupam, which is the level of intimacy with God. They tell a story that after the Israeli army recaptured the Kotel, which is the holiest site in Jerusalem, the entire Temple Mount and the Kotel, the place where the Beis Hamikdash once stood, and God willing, very soon we will see the rebuilding of the third Holy Temple there. So when they received and they acquired this new place, all the soldiers went down to the Kotel. And there were two friends from the same platoon. One was a Haredi, one was very religious, and the other was very secular, he was a Chaloni. And the Haredi goes over to the wall and he puts his head to the wall and begins to cry, and he's crying. He's so emotional, he's so happy to get back this holy place, the place where the Shekhinah dwells. And then he looks and he sees the Chaloni, his friend, who's a very secular person, who doesn't really care about spirituality or Judaism. He's also crying. So the Haredi, the religious man, asks the Chaloni, why are you crying? He says, look, I am a Haredi, I'm a religious person, I understand the value of this mountain, I understand the history behind this mountain, I understand that Adam was created from the earth on top of this mountain, and he brought a sacrifice on the mountain, and Noah brought a sacrifice on the mountain, and all the forefathers brought sacrifice on the mountain, and this was the place of the Holy Temple, and the Mizbeach, and the altar. I understand the power, the holiness, the spirituality behind it, so therefore I'm crying. But you don't believe in all this stuff, why are you crying? So the Chaloni says, I'm crying because I'm not crying. I'm crying because I don't understand the value. But really, he's crying because he has hoid. He has the acknowledgement that there's a power here greater than himself. Though he doesn't understand it, though he cannot internalize it, the Pintel Yid, this godly spark that every Jew possesses, this spark of emes, that God says, Anechi, I implanted this spark of emes into every Jew. That spark acknowledges the reality of God. And that's the level of the Shuruk, that even a person who's so far away is never lost, but can always return and come back home. That is the meaning of the nikuda of the Shuruk.